Do you have it?
Yeah, you got
Firefox.
Yeah, you got Mozilla.
All right.
Should have put Mozilla on and took Explorer off.
Okay, I think we're on. We'll call to order this meeting, the Board of Selectmen, for Tuesday, October 21st. We're going to start tonight with a moment of silence for Chris Lynch. Many people in town knew the Lynch family. Chris was the grandson of Bernie Lynch, longtime former member of our planning board and president of our Milton Access Cable Television. A couple of days ago, many Milton residents came together to take part in a walk and run to show support for Chris, who was courageously battling leukemia. The strong turnout was a tribute to Chris and to the entire Lynch family. And Chris's loss is felt deeply here at Town Hall, where he had many, many friends. So on behalf of all of the employees at Town Hall, we extend our deepest and heartfelt condolences to the Lynch family. And now the Board of Selectmen will observe a moment of silence in memory of Chris. Thank you. Okay, turning to the next item on our agenda, approval of meeting minutes for September 10th.
Move approval of the minutes for September 10th. Second that.
Any changes? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Let me ask the town administrator, do you want to move up the town planner?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to move the town planner up to address the, one of the articles in the fall town meeting warrant.
Okay, welcome, Bill.
Hey.
The planning board is meeting at the same time, or is meeting shortly tonight, so we'll fit in. Bill, this is item number 10 on our agenda, and that's a discussion of all of the fall, or some of the fall town meeting articles. So, Bill, we'll start with you on the article regarding the landfill access road, which I believe is Article 6. And we may come back to this later on in the evening.
I've been asked a couple of different questions, and that is to identify which of the parcels we're talking about changing to municipal use. And I've given each of you a color map that shows the purple, which is 3.72, and the one that's in pink is 0.28 acres. Presently, both of these parcels are still listed as municipal landfill, and it is our intent to go to town meeting to get it changed, just the use on those two parcels to municipal usage. Now, some of the other questions that have come up since then is how did we acquire these parcels? Well, the reason the picture is so large is because you need to go on the other side of the road. When you take that purple and you bring it down, it shows that bigger 30-something acre lot, that parcel that particular trapezoid at the top belongs to. If you go to the triangle on the smaller one, that triangle sits on top of the other trapezoid that's right beside it. That is, so it becomes a total of 7.17 acres. Each of these parcels came from different families. I've also given you the assessor card that shows the history of lot I-38D8, which is the one that has the pink on it, which is the one that was called into question, that somebody thought that it came from a different purpose. It didn't. It was taken in a tax title. It was done in 1954, and I've given you the documentation to that from the assessor. The question on the roadway, I've given you the 1954 annual report, which actually says that we will be back before the Maytown meeting to change the usage of the road from municipal landfill to municipal usage. But this is how we access those properties anyways. I did talk with John Flynn, and we've gone through, preliminarily we've gone through this. We'll be doing it again in preparation for town meeting.
So Bill, just so I'm clear, because this is my first time hearing this, the roadway is zoned as municipal landfill?
We took the road for municipal landfill purposes, but we own the land all the parcels that the road goes over, we own for different purposes. It doesn't preclude us from using the road anyways.
Yeah, so I get the land part, that's zoned municipal land, but the roadway coming in, you said we're going to get that rezoned at a later date?
We'll do that in May.
So right now, it's zoned the same as the land?
Yes,
So how come we're not doing it all together?
because we didn't know that the road had its own separate designation. It came, and if you look in the articles from 1954, which are included here, Article 19 talks about the roadway itself. And the deed that's on the back of the piece you have actually goes in and explains the order of taking for the roadway.
So this information came up, Bill, in response to questions
Yep.
that have arisen regarding this article.
Well, I mean, that's a good question.
Yes.
Whoever asked it, so.
I mean, we knew we owned the road, it was just a matter of, the usage. We knew that it was created, we just didn't know how it was created. And it was 1954 town meeting that approved it.
I mean, it's just a shame that we didn't know it was zoned the same as the land before we got to town meeting.
Absolutely, but that...
Because now we got to go back, we got to go back in May, is it?
Yes, but,
And ask for the same thing.
right. But that's just for the road. It doesn't preclude us now from being able to plan to build on the 3.72 acre
Understood.
and the .28. I mean, ultimately, that was the bigger hurdle, is to get those two parcels so that we could use those to put the animal shelter on.
But why would you want to change the zoning of the road anyway? I mean, it's just a road, right? Would you need to change it?
Probably because there's no landfill purpose for it, for any of this
Right.
property any longer.
It's just cleaning it up, cleaning up the title.
Right.
We are going to come back to this. I think we're expecting Marion McGedrick, who represents the animal shelter,
Yes.
later on, but because Bill has to get over to the planning board. Is there anything more else that's specific questions we have for Bill? If not, we can take this up again later on. No? Okay, Bill, thank you for,
I'll try to get back, we'll see.
thank you very much. Okay, so we'll go back to our number 3 on our agenda, which is to confirm our future meeting dates. We're meeting on October 27th and 28th, Monday and Tuesday of next week. Town meeting starts at 7:30, so we'll be meeting at 6:30 those nights. We also need to add a meeting on November 5th, if both of you, or I'm available, or I think Paula was probably checking availability for everyone. Is everyone free on the 5th, which is a Wednesday evening? The problem with November is Tuesday, the 4th is Election Day, so we can't meet that night, and then the 11th is the Veterans Day. So we're going to have to schedule a Wednesday meeting,
Wednesday the 5th?
Wednesday the 5th.
Just check.
And that actually works well for our town council as well, who will be here if we can meet on the 5th. We did say previously that we would schedule a discussion of the letter we received from the Friends of the Yulin Rink, and we want town council to be here for that discussion. He's in town meetings, as he will be for our town meeting on Monday night. He's in town meetings for other towns during the next few weeks, so a Wednesday night would be the best day for him as
I'm
well.
available.
The only thing I have is the airplane advisory meeting that
On the
night.
5th?
On the 5th.
What
Let's see
time?
if we can change that.
What time is that meeting?
7 o'clock.
Oh, it is. Well, why don't we, maybe we can, see if it's possible, but if not, maybe on Monday we'll figure out another date that we can meet. We'll need to check with John as well.
Was that in your calendar, Emery, at all?
No,
No?
I don't attend that meeting.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll work on scheduling, but at least we'll be meeting on the 27th, 28th.
Okay.
Okay. The next item is approval of payroll and vendor warrants.
I'll move approval of the current payroll and vendor warrants.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Citizen speak. Do we have anyone here to address the board at citizen speak tonight? And seeing none, we will go on to a public hearing. We have 2 matters on our agenda tonight with Sheila Gillis, who's here representing National Grid. NSTAR, I'm sorry, NSTAR. You told me that earlier and I forgot.
There are 2 motions. I will be recusing myself from the second one.
Okay, so we'll convene a public hearing under Section 22 of Chapter 166 of the General Laws, We have before us request from NSTAR to install conduit in Harlan Street and Walcott Road. So we have a representative of NSTAR. Is there any member of the public who wishes to be heard at the hearing? Then seeing none, Sheila, thank you for coming in and for joining us tonight. We appreciate your being here to answer any questions. Why don't we start with the Harlan Street property? We have a memo from our department. Yes, sir. Are you here?
Can I ask you a question?
Are you here on
With regard to this?
You should come up.
I mean,
Sir, why don't you come up so your voice can be heard at the microphones?
I'm just wondering about this.
Sir, can you come up to the microphone, please?
I'm just going to admit my ignorance. I'm just wondering what this was
Okay,
about.
sir, could you just give us your name and your address for the record?
Mark Paley, 40 Cushing Road,
Okay?
Milton.
What's your question?
I don't understand why I got this. I mean, this doesn't affect my property, I don't
No.
think.
No, it's just you're in a butter in this public hearing just to run electric conduit from a telephone pole into a property, that's all.
If you live near where this pole is being installed, I forget what the footage is, 700 or so many square feet from the location, the property location, then you would get a notice that there's a hearing. And this is, let me just click onto it, this, maybe Sheila can give us some more information on this, but this is really to install line at a utility pole.
And that's it.
That's it.
The pole is already existing, and they're just bringing a wire across the town-owned property into the private property.
So I got this because the law
Requires it,
Yes,
that's
yes.
correct.
requires it,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Yes.
That's it.
It also requires us to advertise it in the newspaper, so there's certain hoops we have to jump through.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else who wanted to be heard on the utility public hearing? Okay. Ms. Gillis, did you want to provide any information to the board?
We're looking to install approximately 18 feet of conduit from pole 212 over 10 on Holland Street, and that's to bring in electrical service into a carriage house located at 610 Holland Street.
And it will not involve any tearing up of the roadway at all?
No.
We have a recommendation from the Department of Public Works
Okay.
in favor of it.
I'll move to approve a request from NSTAR Electric to install approximately 18 feet of conduit in Harlan Street at pole 212/10, 1,198 feet northwest of Hillside Street to provide electric service to 610 Harlan Street, contingent upon the stone wall not being disturbed without prior permission of the planning office.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous.
And I'll recuse myself from this next one, as
Okay.
this is my property.
Okay. The next property location is at number 1 Kinsale Lane. And we'll just, for the record again, ask, is there anyone who wishes to address this particular item? Ms. Gillis, would you like to say anything to this?
We're looking to install approximately 4 feet of conduit from pole 151 over 10, Walcott, and it's to provide service to a new home at 86 Walcott Road.
It must also be number 1 Kinsale Lane.
Yes.
Okay. And again, we have a recommendation from our Public Works Department supporting this application.
I'll move to approve a request from NSTAR Electric to install 4 feet of conduit in Walcott Road at pole 151/10 to provide electric service to number 1 Kinsale Lane.
Second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gillis.
Thank you very much.
Good night. Okay, the next item on our agenda is, we're going to have a brief discussion. This is not a common topic for a Board of Selectmen agenda, but we're going to talk a little bit about Ebola preparedness in the town and in the state, and our State Department of Public Health and the State Emergency Management Association is having lots of meetings, a lot of conference calls for elected officials, and we wanted to ask our first responders, specifically Chief Grant and Chief Wells, who are here, and We've also given an opportunity to the hospital to tell us a little bit about what the preparations are that they're making, because this is a topic that's of interest to the general public, and sometimes the concern gets a little bit too hyped, but at the same time, it's something that is on the minds of town government officials, and specifically our first responders and our public health personnel. So,
Is our public health director here, or?
no, she's not going to be here tonight, but we do have, we have Chief Jack Grant from the fire department, Chief Richard Wells from the police department.
Yeah, I was just curious to hear what the recommendations were on the phone-in.
There was a conference call.
The phone-in conference
Let me just
call, yeah.
introduce, and Cindy Page is Vice President of Clinical Services at Beth Israel Deaconess Hospital, Milton. I've had opportunity to work with Cindy over the years, and she's also a member of our local emergency planning commission. So I think the three people who are here can probably speak to that. Some of us did listen on that call, and it was quite an informative and interesting.
Yeah, I did want to, and I
Conference
couldn't
call.
make it at 3. They were supposed to have posted it later, and I could never find the rebroadcast of it.
Well, I know Jack, maybe we should start with Jack, because as president of the Fire Chiefs Association, he's been at a number of these meetings, and he can tell us a little bit about what's going on, Jack.
Yeah, at this point, what they're working on this morning was coming out with a set of minimum standards for first responder protective equipment. And they came up with a pretty good list that should be out fairly soon. They're also working on some training issues, trying to standardize things across the state. The big thing with it on our end, and I would say the hospital's end, it's a waterborne element or a fluid-borne element. So it's basically time, distance, and shielding. It's not a really difficult thing to protect yourself from. So it's, stay away from the fluid, keep yourself covered, and go from there. Again, like I say, it's nothing we haven't seen before. It's a different name.
Okay. So hospitals we are constantly preparing and managing infectious disease. I think that, this particular disease has not been seen in the United States. That's probably what makes it very scary to many people. But in terms of the management, we actually have done quite a bit of preparation. We've been working with the local community partners. We've been working with EMS. We've been working with our system. So at the hospital, our goal is really to make sure that we are screening people appropriately, and even prior to this particular outbreak in Texas, we were doing all of the components of what you would be looking for, what they're looking for at the CDC and at the state level, is that we're screening people for travel history, because there are many ailments that people can carry back from different countries. So our goal is really to screen people and to be looking at what the signs and symptoms are and appropriately managing them in those situations. So we have a very active plan, not only local within the hospital, but also within our hospital system. So with the Beth Israel system, because our goal is that if we were to ever see a patient who had a highly contagious ailment and was very sick and needed treatment, really our goal is to evaluate, stabilize, and prepare for transport. So we've been working with Fallon and with the medical center, because they actually have inpatient management capacity, is that any patient that would come in would not make it past our ED. They would be managed appropriately in the ED, and then they'd be transported into the medical center where they have the containment unit, because it's most contagious when the patient is most sick.
By medical center, Cindy, you're talking about Beth
Beth Israel
Deaconess
Deaconess
Medical
Medical Center. Yes, thank
When
you.
you say ED,
Emergency department.
We call it ER.
Okay.
They have this ED terminology. She
Kinda what I figured, but I wasn't sure.
We've been friends for 20 years, we're trying to she won't get rid of it. But,
well, I guess I have a question. I mean, even in the ER, ED, whatever you want to call it, just to stabilize, you would have the nurses would have contact with a potential
Absolutely.
patient. So have they been trained on how to suit up and everything else and does the hospital have all the necessary?
Yes, we
Shield
have,
equipment.
we have all of the necessary PPE. We have been a little bit more aggressive than the CDC was initially, and the CDC has now caught up with us. We've worked collaboratively not only with Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, our community partners, but also with all of the area hospitals in the state, and looking at what is the appropriate protective equipment that you should have. We have looked at who needs to have contact with these patients and making sure that we are not exposing, if we have anyone who's potentially contagious, that we are limiting the exposure to a very limited number of folks who have had extensive training, including one-on-one training. The most important thing in this situation is, how do you put on equipment? Is it appropriately fit for you? Do you know how to put it on? Have we put it on you so that you know that you're not a little claustrophobic? Because if you are claustrophobic, the ability for you to follow directions after having this on is very difficult. And the most important thing is, how do you take it off? And can you take it off if you have any contaminant on you? How do you take it off without contaminating yourself? So we have been using the buddy system all along, and that's, I think, a process that you've heard a little bit about probably in the last day and a half, couple of days, is that it's important to have somebody watching you as you put on and take off the equipment. We have been using chocolate sauce to train people with, because you need a visual entity to be able to tell you, are you contaminating yourself or not? Everybody who has gone through training has not necessarily passed training at this point, so we are only putting people in the front lines who have been trained and been deemed competent. It can be very difficult. We've identified who should probably never be suited up, whether it be for an potentially infectious patient, or if we had a hazmat situation, we know who is a little bit claustrophobic. So we modify jobs so that we don't put people in those situations. And we also know those who are struggling to be able, even with a buddy, to be able to disrobe from having the garb on. So there's constant training once they're trained. Our emphasis right now is making sure that our staff have an opportunity to continuously practice putting on and taking off the gowns and the gloves and the hoods and the booties, because it is a very, very time-consuming and difficult endeavor to be able to do it without touching the outside. And the buddy is the most critical aspect of it, because they're the ones watching out for you, making sure that in between each step you're stopping and you're using Purell to wash the gloves or wash your hands once you get to the end of the process. We also have a very rigorous process post management if a patient were to be managed, where the individual is assessed by our occupational health department to determine, is there any risk? Was there any potential that somebody would have had an exposure, and how do we manage those individuals, both from a physical health perspective, but also from a stress perspective. Do they need a little bit of debriefing? Do they need a little bit of support? Because it can be very stressful.
In terms of if somebody does walk into the emergency room, and I know it would be a very rare circumstance, probably will not happen, but should somebody walk in with the disease, and there are other people in the emergency room, is there a mechanism to basically isolate people and
Yes, immediately isolate the person is, again...
But what about the other people in the room?
Well, it's if somebody is not showing symptoms, if they are not showing symptoms, then it may just be a screen out and there's no worry. Again, this is not an airborne contaminant or an airborne virus.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's all in keeping distance and maintaining distances, so we don't have people sitting in close proximity to the walk, to the entrance up to the folks that are there, checking people in. We quickly ask questions. We actually have signage outside, so prior to, not only for this, but also for the flu, we ask that if you're not feeling well, that you place a mask on, and a mask is enough to protect everyone. So we have the sign both in English and in French. asking not only if they've traveled within the regions, in the West African regions, but also if someone's not feeling well, because it is flu season. So at all of our entrances, we have signage that if you're not feeling well, to put on a mask. And a surgical mask is the appropriate protection when somebody is entering the facility.
At this point, I would just add to that, that even in the street, that, you know, the isolation distance is set at 6 feet. So these guys, with what they're doing in the hospital, will be far beyond that.
Okay. That, I guess that was my next way, as first responders, police and fire. I assume you've been trained to understand what the symptoms are of the disease and learn to recognize the potential that somebody might have it.
Yeah, really, and right now, in talking with Fallon's, you know, it's one of those things that if it's a suspect case and there's no need for immediate intervention, the plan is for the police and the fire to basically stay in the street and, you know, expose the fewest amount of people as possible, so Fallon's would take the lead in that.
Okay.
They've taken a big, if you followed them at all, just in both what they've disseminated to us, and they've been followed regularly in the media, they've done a great job. They've been right out front with this from the get-go. I mean, we are fortunate we have big city EMS here in a company that big with the type of resources they bring. So for both our responders, fire and police, we wouldn't even have to go in. They're able to bring a lot to the scene quickly, similar to what you saw in Braintree. That patient in Braintree from Harvard went right in town. I think it would be similar if we had a house here. I don't think Fallon's going to take anybody who even questions is going to go near B.I. Deaconess. The issue for B.I. Deaconess is, as Cindy described, is if they walk in the ER. And we have protocols for that, for locking down the whole facility and going to whatever level you have to. The only final part that I'm going to add is that if we get a person that we trace back to a house in Milton, there will have to be protocols for us to lock that down. We have contract companies that, if you saw one of the cases, it might have been the first nurse in Dallas where the house with the bed sheets, or I might actually, it was the first victim, the victim who died, the things just sat there for days. Those things have to be addressed because, as Chief Grant says, this isn't like the flu or a cold. This is very similar to an HIV type of transmission. You have to have that. So those are just issues that we would have to address right away and make sure that we bring in whatever contract to make sure that we go as far back as we can go in our control to deal with the
Now, in terms of the
remediation
school nurse and, you know, just kind of thinking.
It's coming everywhere. I can't
So
think
have
of
they been taught to recognize, again, the symptoms and take the temperature?
Actually,
and
Margaret Gibbons sent them. She was one of the first that I saw through Caroline that she sent to all the school nurses in town about the same thing. But
Great.
this
Okay.
stuff coming, NIH, DPS, MEMA, DFS, Dr. Muse from Canton, and I just sent Caroline a PowerPoint that he put together this week that's just been out since yesterday. There's a lot of information. And we're learning. I just heard on the way here that the NBC correspondent who caught it, he was determined today to be Ebola-free, and the first thing he said was he still doesn't know how he got it. He thought he took all the precautions. He has no idea how he got it.
Okay.
So we'll learn as we go, but we do understand that much, is that
Yeah, the big thing that they're not knowing how he caught it, I believe there's one of the nurses, they're not sure how she got it either. But the thought is, and Cindy mentioned it earlier, hazmat, which has been around for a long time, you know, it's always been stressed, you know, the dress-out procedure. You know, once you're out of that area and you've been fully deconned and everything else, the doffing of the equipment has been less of an issue. In this case, it's found that it's the reverse, and you've really got to slow yourself down and be very careful, which is why it's a buddy system, even if it can be a supervised buddy system in taking the equipment off. And that's where they think that they have caught this, those that did.
Right.
if you've seen the CNN special that Dr. Gupta has done, who was there in medical, he uses the chocolate sauce analogy, and he puts the whole thing, and it's in his chief, it's taking it off is really a significant situation, totally different than normal deconning, or how it's, and he did it and demonstrated it, and it's very, and again, to what Cindy said, you know, the whole being in that suit and the cost, you know, not being used to it. Firefighters are probably the most used to it because they're in the Scott air packs all the time. for anyone, law enforcement, EMS, anyone else, even public health, it's not the norm. Actually, probably the people that are on the most are like the aftermath people, because everything they do is in it.
And just to follow up on the schools, not only public school conversations, but also there has been a lot of reach out and discussion amongst the local colleges and the local private schools as well. So there's been good communication amongst all of the local partners to make sure that all the facts are out, and if there are questions or resources that need to be assisted with or provided with, that is something that we as a team have made an effort to ensure that is occurring.
Great.
Cindy, we appreciate you bringing some colleagues with you from the hospital tonight.
Yes, I would love to introduce them.
Yes, that'd be wonderful.
We are very lucky to have a local expert. So we have our infectious disease physician here, George Baranaga, behind me.
Baranaga.
And
Welcome.
I have the director of our public relations department, Bob McChrystal, as well. And I think one of the questions that Bob may have is for you all, as we kind of wrap this up, is there something in terms of education or information that would be helpful for us to be providing on our website going forward, if you feel that there are questions that are unanswered or information that could be helpful?
Okay, that's probably something we'd want to give some thought to with our Board of Health and the Public Health Director, and let you know.
Great.
Unless anyone else has any thoughts, or Richard or Jeff?
Other than the fact that it has been all over the news, I think
Yes.
most people are at least aware of what the symptoms are, and
Certainly gotten a lot of attention.
Yeah.
And,
I think the fact that 2 healthcare workers got in the first case, that's pretty dramatic, and I think that sent shockwaves. It really expedited things through the country in all of the disciplines, as far as we better pay attention here.
I talked with the Public Health Director, Caroline Kinsella, today, who couldn't be here, but said it is serious as we're taking this and doing all the preparations and protocols that need to be done. Everyone needs to worry more about the flu, because you're more likely to get that
absolutely,
than
yes.
anything else. And she recommends hand washing and being very careful not to try to avoid the flu, because we're, as you mentioned, Cindy, we're heading right into that season as well.
Well, that's another good point, too, that the flu shot even more so than ever, because the symptoms are so similar that, the chance that you send people into a panic just because you have the flu, but, somebody mistakes it,
And it's really coming down. The most important thing is that it's travel history. Travel history is the number one, and it is very specific countries followed up by symptoms, so.
We don't normally take questions, but this man had his hand up. Did you have a question, sir, that you'd like to ask?
Is there a threshold temperature below which the life of the virus is significantly reduced when it's out on the surface?
That might be a question for Dr. Baranaga.
I don't think anyone knows that. Lisa, I certainly don't know the answer, and I haven't seen anything that addresses that, so I think I can know.
Yeah, it's, at the state conference call today, Dr. Al Di Maria talked a little bit about, it's about whether or not a surface has contaminant on it and whether it's wet or dry. That's more of, once it's dry, this contaminant is very fragile. So it can be eradicated very easily on superficial surfaces with basic cleaning.
Well, thank you all for coming in tonight. It's an important topic for people to know that we're at least preparing for and thinking about, and it's on the radar of your town government. So Chief Grant, Chief Wells, thank you.
I have to give Sergeant Caputo a plug. He does a good job keeping the LAPC together. As I
Well,
articulated to you.
yeah, just really quick to mention that, I'm glad you said that. They've got it set so that, the question's going to be asked from their dispatch. You're immediately going to start that check down, because it is flu season, Have you traveled out of the country in the last 21 days? Has anybody you know? And you can really get it off the map pretty quickly. So, and that's going to start right there at their dispatch.
Great.
Chief Grant, Chief Wells, thank you. Cindy Page, Dr.
Thank you.
Baranaga, and Bob McChrystal from the hospital.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you all
you.
for coming in tonight. We appreciate it.
Good night.
Good night. Okay, we have another item that we need to move up. I know we've got Joe Lynch and Catherine Dunphy here for the stormwater, but Joe Prondak is our building commissioner. He needs to be at the Board of Appeals meeting, which is starting very shortly. So we're going to move up number 9, which is the demolition bid for 0 Central Avenue.
Good evening.
Good evening, Joe. Thanks for
Welcome.
coming here, and we know you have to be downstairs, so this is the demolition bid for 0 Central Avenue. Do you want to start us off?
Sure. So we received a bid, single bid for the demolition of our portion of the building. The bid was $347,224. We have since renegotiated some of that cost with the demolition contractor under some supervision from town council. And what we were able to bring the cost down was about $30,000 in total. 24,500 of that is in key costs that we would have to absorb, and that's similar to what the previous bid process called out for. And then an additional $5,500 was taken off the bid in allowing the contractor to leave the basically the foundation, the underground portion of the foundation in place.
Would that mean, Joe, he took 5,500 off the labor?
I would think it was 5,500 off the labor because he did say that all his equipment is going to be there anyway. So, yeah, I would assume it's labor.
The 24.5 you said is really to do with the MBTA, right?
Correct. That was his allowance for the MBTA. So, based on that, well, from a public safety point of view, it is my hope, my recommendation that the bid be awarded. However, I do realize there are financial considerations for the town because we are substantially over what we budgeted for this demolition.
And our budget was based on an estimate, Joe?
It was based on a volunteer estimate from a member of the Suffolk construction team, and that was, I believe, $250 to $275 approximately, and you know, that was the result of a cursory inspection of the building, not a detailed inspection of the building. So, you know, I think this building certainly has some unique characteristics that are unlike any other building in the area, that present a unique set of challenges. The proximity to the MBTA and the co-ownership of the building, coupled with the collapsed portion of the building on the unknown land, which is kind of landlocked. You can't get to it until our building or the Conley's portion of the building is torn down. So I do know that it is a high bid. Purely from a public safety point of view, I would hope we can find a way to get this building down as soon as possible, and certainly I would advocate for not going back out to bid if we could possibly find a way to do that.
Now, the contractor has agreed to an additional week extension?
If it's necessary, yes.
Again, I would still feel more, we're, you know, from Suffolk's estimate, granted it may have been just a, you know, off the cuff estimate, but we appropriated money based upon that estimate, and we're, you know, somewhere it's $50,000 above that estimate. I would feel more, and we have a sole source bid, and we have, you know, no other bidders. I would feel more comfortable with a peer review of the bid, just to know that it's a fair bid.
What would that involve?
Getting just a professional, like the person that originally gave us the estimate to...
Would there be a cost to it, and how formal would it be?
I don't think it would have to be tremendously formal. I just want a professional with professional set of eyes to look at it and come back to us and say, in their opinion, it's the bid is fair.
So the amount that's currently, that you've negotiated it down to, Joe, is what?
Is now $317,224.
And I mean, if it does come in as a fair bid, I would say for the $5,000 or so difference, why not just pull the rest of the foundation out and vastly improve the land?
Sure.
That would,
Yeah, I'm not opposed to a peer review. What's the likelihood, Joe, that we'd be able to get one in pretty short order? Because this, just keep in mind, this demolition bidder has given us a couple of extensions already, and the building, not just our building, the Connolly, the combined building, you know, we've, for a long time, been very concerned about public safety, and the building's been condemned. The 131 LA, well, we haven't, I guess there's been various condemnation proceedings, but we're concerned about public safety. We've had a 139 hearing, and we've had a demolition agreement that we've entered into. I would be inclined to go ahead and accept the bid based on what Mr. Brondek's recommendation is and what the condition of the building is. I know that it's over the amount that was estimated, but again, as Joe explained, that was a cursory estimate. And you know, I think, Joe, you said at our last meeting that one of the issues that the demolition bidder mentioned to you is that the price of steel, the market has changed for that, and obviously he would be reselling portions of the building that are
scrap
comprised of
steel,
steel for scrap.
I don't have any specific numbers on that, but I do believe the contractor's truthful in that statement. I know that price of steel does fluctuate, but I don't have a reference to compare that to necessarily.
We are, just by way of background, we are, as everyone knows, we have had some discussions with the owner of 131 Elliott Street, and those are ongoing, but in talking with our town council, and Joe, the town administrator, and I had a meeting with the bidder, and we did indicate to him that we are in some negotiations, and if, that's an if, depending on how the board would vote, if we were to accept the bid, that we would want the bid to be made null and void if we were to sell it, or transfer the property out of our control into a third party. So, so one option that we would have would be to accept the bid and make it contingent upon the award of the bid becoming null and void if we were to transfer the property, the town-owned property, to the owner of 131 Elliott Street or to another owner.
Yeah, but that agreement with the Connollys would have to be made really soon.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't want to spend $320,000 to tear down the building,
Agreed.
plus $169,000 for the acquisition, plus about $100,000 over the last number of years in legal fees, which is about $590,000, $600,000 we would have spent on a building to
Correct.
hand over to a guy, you know, to put up a mixed-use development. I'm not sure if that's a good investment for the town, you know?
No, we should keep in mind the purpose that the town acquired the property for back a dozen or so years ago was to influence the ultimate outcome of the area, because that was taking place at the same time that the ULI and other experts were trying to design what the reuse of that building would be. So it was really to influence the ultimate development of the site. So we should keep that in mind. But naturally, yes, I agree. If we were to pay the demolition cost, obviously we'd be in a much different position. But what this proposal would be to accept the bid and make it subject to us rendering the bid null and void, which the developer, the bidder would have to agree to. So it would be in our motion, but it would also be in the notice of award, and it would be in the bid contract, that if we were to enter into an agreement to transfer the property in short, fairly soon, obviously, then the bid would become null and void before the costs really were incurred. So I agree with you on that, Dennis, you would contemplate it happening sooner rather than later.
And I know, Joe, I know you put a lot of work into the RFP, but it just concerns me a little bit that 11 bid packages went out and only one came back. And, you know, I did contact a few of the contractors that wanted to bid on it, but didn't feel that there wasn't enough information in the package for them to put a bid in. So I'm wondering if it would be worth just denying the bid altogether and going back out to bid and risk coming in at $100,000 less or even more. Or at the very least, as Tom was saying, maybe delay it by a week so that we can get some we can get some information from these contractors, and if we get the feeling that we can save 100,000, I think it's worth it. You know, we walked the building the other day.
Right.
Joe and I walked the building. My first time ever in there. It is scary, to be
Yeah, it is.
truthful. But in my opinion, the Connolly's portion is in imminent danger of collapsing. There's no doubt about that. There is roof collapse. But in the town-owned portion, it is a steel and concrete building. It's not, again, only in my opinion, and I'm not a structural engineer, but I deal with them all the time. I don't think it's in imminent danger of collapsing right now. I think if we delay it by a week so we can get some, what you call it, a peer review?
Yeah, just a cost estimate, you know, somebody to look at the bid and say that, yeah, it's a reasonable bid based upon what we now know the conditions are, I guess,
Right.
you know.
I mean, personally,
I think it's due diligence, really.
I would like to, and I mentioned this to Joe earlier, you know, I'm in the middle of getting demolition bids for 3 different projects that I'm doing. This is what I do for a living in the construction industry. But I didn't have a chance to speak to this demolition contractor. You know, I think I'd like that opportunity. I did text him yesterday only because I got the information yesterday. And he did text me back. He was supposed to call me today, but he didn't. If we could delay this by a week, I would love to speak to him and see how he's coming up with this price and actually do some research on steel prices myself. 'Cause all I'm hearing is that steel prices are going down. How do we know that? Has anybody researched that? Maybe steel prices are going up. But I think 1 week would make a big difference, Katie. If,
Well, as I said at the beginning, I'm not opposed to it if the demolition bidder is willing to give us another week. This would now be our 3rd extension. So, Joe, is it feasible, is it realistic for you within about a week to get a review, to consult with either the party that gave us the estimate or another
I would
party?
certainly reach out to that party, but if they weren't able to respond in that quickly, I think my only other option would be to somehow reach out to another demolition contractor, one that did not bid on the project. I think would only be, I think that would be the fairest way. But I would expect that they would charge a fee for that.
Do you have any idea what the fee might be?
I would have no way of knowing. If I had to guess, I would say, it's, you know, nobody's going to come to the table for less than a couple of $1,000s, I would think.
Yeah, possibly, but. But again, I just want to know that we're not awarding a bid that is just totally unreasonable. I don't know that it is, I don't believe that it is, but I just don't know. I'm not a contractor.
As we sit here and speak, I think perhaps Cal Olson, who is the lead architect on our school projects, and who has, since the school project, has done a number of other projects for the town, might be a good resource to check with that. Very, very non-biased and I think would be a fair and reasonable assessment of that bid.
I think a week would make a big difference because, again, I think we have 3 scenarios here. Number one, and I think it's the most important, we really should, if we are going to get a deal with Mr. Connolly, that should happen that should happen quickly. Because then we can go ahead and do whatever we have to do with the building, transfer it and all that good stuff. But if he's not going to, if it's not going to happen, a mixed-use development down there, if the 40B goes ahead, and we award this bid, it's going to cost us $600,000 to put in basically a parking lot.
Well, I think that's, number one, that $100,000 calculation is coming from a number of different sources, right? You're talking about the initial purchase price, you're talking about litigation.
Correct.
And there's no guarantee that it would be a parking lot. I think we can all be agreed upon that. There's certainly no agreement on that at this stage.
Well, my question then would be, for scenario number 3, are we better off, if Mr. Connolly does not take the building, are we better off just putting it out to bid and let somebody else purchase the building and put an office building in there and create income out of it. Besides spending, again, close to $600,000, everything included.
I guess the practical problem we have, though, is we're all of agreement that 131 Elliott has to come down, that building is condemned.
That's correct.
And is in danger of having more collapses in it, that I don't know that we have the time to try and sell the building as is and have somebody else take it down. It'd be nice, but I don't think we have that kind of time.
Well, let's keep in mind, too, we're under a demolition agreement that we've signed.
Correct, yeah.
And has obligations on the town as well as obligations on the other party, Carrick. So, Joe, is this agreeable to, you've spoken with the demolition bidder, that he's agreeable to a one-week extension? We wouldn't want to have this expire without having an agreement with him that
Right.
he would extend it for another week.
I believe he is agreeable to that, and I will.
Which would take us through Tuesday, the 28th, which
And
is
we're
the
meeting-
second night of town meeting.
Yeah, I actually put it through, I tentatively written one up just before coming in here, so I made it through Wednesday just to, I made it for 8 days instead of 7, just to make sure.
Okay.
If we came to some agreement next Tuesday, then it would give us that following day to do the actual paperwork.
Okay. I'd be agreeable to that if we're not, it sounds like we don't have a consensus here on the board to go ahead and accept the bid contingent upon it becoming null and void if we transfer it. So probably the second best option is to extend it for the week and see what more information we can, obtain at this point.
That's fine with me.
Joe, is there anything else you want to add about this?
Not at the moment. I think that pretty much covers it. I'll go forward with the assessment.
Great.
If the bid got denied next, we say in 8 days' time, how long would it take to go back out again?
I think, it's going to take at least several weeks. I mean, the first bid, it took 2 months roughly to get that together. And I think this time we have to go back and sit with the T. I think we would be obligated to try and ensure that the other bidders, that everybody submits a bid. Everybody who takes a bid package submits a bid, or at least a fair number of them. I think some of the ambiguity on this last bid was likely with the T, because I think some of these contractors were calling the T, getting various parties to comment on what it might or might not cost for a shutdown and what's involved in that.
And no man's land.
Yeah, and that was another complication, but.
But that was included in the bid as something that we would be including within
Yes.
our
Right.
responsibility.
Right. So I think, we're looking at another 2 to 3 months to put the bid package together and get it rebid. And then the award process, I mean, we're surely looking at February and March, and then if we have a disastrous winter, that's certainly going to delay the actual demolition. It could be as late as April or May.
And Joe, we should keep in mind, as you pointed out at the last meeting, a future bid could come in higher than $347,000, or even use the 317 we're talking now. We could be looking at a next round of bids that comes in higher. If
That is
what we're being told about the
always a
steel prices
possibility.
is true, there could be other factors that, I think rejecting the bid would be opening us up to a lot of risk that we'd have delays, we wouldn't be able to get the building down as quickly as we'd like, we have the demolition agreement to think about, we have
Right.
potential additional costs to think about, and it seems to me it's highly unlikely we're going to
The only way I could
get a
see.
substantial reduction in this
Right.
bid.
The only way I could see rejecting the bid is if a professional came in and said it is unrealistic.
That makes sense that we should take that course of action then, because we can talk all about other bidders all we want, but at the end of the day, we had one bidder, and 11 bid packages went out. I know there are various reasons given. Joe, I think you mentioned at the last meeting that one of the bidders who took out a package, we shouldn't even call him a bidder, it was someone who took out a package but did not bid, mentioned the fact that there's co-ownership of this building and that there'd be 2 different contractors working on it, and that was an issue that prohibited that party from submitting a bid. So there could be multiple reasons that bids were not submitted here, and I think we should keep all of those factors in mind when we're considering that even though this is over the estimate amount, the estimate was last winter, spring, and it was a cursory, it was a volunteer estimate, and we're grateful to the party that gave the estimate, but it may not have been as in-depth as the bid was.
Agreed, but, it's just so unusual that 11 bid packages go out and only one come back, and the people that I spoke to had the same reasoning for not sending in a bid. So in the private sector, there is no way in hell I would accept a bid if I only received one bid. I'd be going out over and over again, because it's money coming out of my pocket. It's the way I look at the town money as well. We only have one bid. I think it's substantially high. I wouldn't be opposed to rejecting the bid and going back out immediately. Hopefully we'll get the eminent domain passed on Monday night. And we know a lot more about the MBTA license right now. I mean, we have a lot more knowledge about it now than we did when we went out to bid.
We do, and it's resulted in a $317,000 number rather than $347. So there is a, and again, some of that cost for the T is coming out of the bid, but it would be borne by the town. So it's really transferring the obligation from one area to another area.
I mean, to be honest, I'll have a hard time voting on this if it's only one bid that we have in front of us. It's just not in my nature to do that. I can't do it.
Okay. Is there anything else on this topic? So, Joe, you will get back to us as soon as
I will
possible?
reach out to a consultant and get back to you as soon as I can.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, sure.
All right. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks very much.
Okay, we are back now on our agenda to number 8. And this is a discussion on the new stormwater regulations. Joined by our DPW Director, Joe Lynch,
Hey, Joe.
and former Selectman Kathy Dunphy, who is our MWRA representative.
Kathy.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi, how are you?
Catherine is not just our representative, but she's also the chairman of the advisory board of the MWRA, so she's the person in the know at the authority.
Probably knows more about this topic than anyone in Milton, maybe in the state.
I'm sure.
I don't think so.
I do want to thank Catherine and the advisory board for hosting what was a very, very informative discussion and workshop last Thursday over in the city of Wellesley, town of Wellesley, where all their MWRA community members gathered and to hear about, in a collective fashion, what the stormwater permit, this new stormwater permit, might look like and how it might affect the towns and the member communities. And I would guess, and I don't have a real number, but first of all, it was lunch, so you automatically know the attendance is going to double by a factor of 3.
Well, we always have a lunch, but
Right, so
it was
well
a good
attended.
lunch.
I'd say it was well over 100 people, probably close
Yes.
to 150 people attended this workshop. And what I found very rewarding in that was that the things that I've been professing here in Milton and in the town of Shirley before I came to Milton, in the city of Melrose before I went to Shirley, is the other shoe was about to drop from EPA. Now, it's taken a long time. 2003 is when the first EPA general permit came out affecting most of the communities. Prior to 2003, only the large communities within regions were affected, and there were only 4 in the New England region that were subject to the Phase 1 permit, if you will. Under the Phase 2 permit, which we were lumped in with for the vast majority of all other communities across New England and across the country, was quite onerous, as we thought. What it really did, though, in retrospect, is it took some pretty basic things. Let's let people know why stormwater is important and what causes pollution in stormwater, and what are the things that you do as an individual household owner or as a business owner or as a community. What are the things that you do that contribute to the pollution streams? And with that knowledge and the public education piece of it, along with it became a series of BMPs, best management practices. Part of those were good housekeeping. Part of those were a more diligent effort in catch basin cleaning and street sweeping. Part of those things is diligent use of applications of fertilizers on town-owned properties. Promotion of things like household hazardous waste collection, yard waste collection, all those sorts of things. It also gave the towns an opportunity to convene a stormwater advisory committee in each town. We did. The result of that was the creation of our first stormwater bylaw. And one of the things that stormwater bylaw allowed us to do was to look at well, what are the types of things we want to include to control pollution, and what are the things that affect us during construction, which directly, in a dramatic way, affect water quality as it leaves a site and finds its way into the system. That 5-year permit issued in 2003 has been renewed ad nauseum, just automatically rolled over each year since. So we are now working on the end of the 6th-year extension. All the while, EPA and DEP in the communities have been trying to wrestle with what this new permit is going to look like. And I've been saying for a long time now, is that you thought the old one was onerous, wait till you see the new and improved permit. So what has happened now is 3 weeks ago, the federal EPA has issued the draft federal permit. And I talked about this a couple weeks ago when I was here before the board. And what that has done is, for the first time now, let towns and cities in our region know, boy, oh boy, these are the things that are going to be required, and these are the additional things that we're going to need to do. So I found it very rewarding last week to go to the workshop and hear experts in the field point to things that we've done as a community here in Milton, and we've done well. And more importantly, the participation in things like we did last year by partnering up with other communities and applying for a Community Innovation Challenge grant and receiving that and moving that, with regards to stormwater, and moving that forward. And in moving that forward, that Milton presented itself as a pilot community to look at for the first time. And the reason why they selected us is because we have the baseline of our GIS mapping very, very well mapped out. We've got great detail. We've got great regulation. We've reinstituted our household hazardous waste program. We've got a great recycling program. We have curbside yard waste. We have all of the elements. So even a community such as ours doing all the right things under the old permit, use it as a baseline and then measure under the new permit, these are the things you need to do additionally. And I think I alarmed you folks a couple of weeks ago when I told you that, and I'm trying to go to my numbers, but I think in round numbers, the new permit, what it means to Milton, and this is based on the grant that we did looking at Milton, is about $1.2 million a year, every year.
Of additional cost?
Of additional cost. No, of cost.
Of cost, okay.
Of which we're currently doing about $350,000 in effort.
About $750,000.
So our yard waste efforts, our hazardous waste collection efforts, our street sweeping, our catch basin cleaning, those things that we're doing on a pretty regular basis is a value of about $350 that we're already doing. So it's that gap is what we're talking about. And we're in a better position than, I dare say, the vast majority of communities across the Commonwealth. I think you'd agree, wouldn't you, Catherine? Yes. And which doesn't go far with affordability.
No.
So the second part of the workshop last week hosted by the authority looked at the question of affordability. So what should towns do? And that's why I was here a couple of weeks ago, and that was to ask the Board of Selectmen to endorse us signing on for another round of a Community Innovation Challenge grant, where we would look at the springboard from what we've just done this last year, what we might do next year, and what it would do is address the affordability question. And I think we talked about it ever so briefly, and it's way premature to talk about, what it might look like or how it may go. But the consensus of the New England region, and I dare say the country, is you can't absorb this new effort within your existing structure of tax base. You may pass this along through your tax base through whatever legislative requirements are, and in our instance would be Prop 2.5, to carry it on and pass it off across all the taxpayers, or look at creating a stormwater utility. Stormwater utility looking very much like an enterprise, where the funds would be raised through some equitable fashion, yet to be determined, equitable fashion whose purpose of collecting those monies is dedicated specifically and exclusively for carrying out the requirements of the federal stormwater permit. So that's, in last week's session focused on all of those elements. I'm happy that, Catherine hosting it as the AMWRA Advisory Board, but more important, I'm very happy that, Anne Marie and Amy, who've been hearing me wringing my hands all these years about this cost coming and it looming. I think they've heard it firsthand. They've heard it from me, but now that I've gotten, I hope, some heightened credibility on, this is not unique to Milton, and we're in good shape, and the things that I've been talking about are things that is where the industry is going in New England. So, the draft permit's out. It's out for a 90-day public comment period.
It's my understanding that we'll see that permit from between now and February. We may even have a permit by February.
Might even have the permit. Well, it's out for public comment for the 90-day period that's required. I've seen 90-day public comment periods last 180 days. I've seen them last 2 years. I've seen them reject the public comment and go back and rewrite. What we're hearing out of EPA this time around is enough, 6 years of extensions. We've worked out the details. The permit is coming. So we're talking about, a permit. When I say permit, it's a mandate is going to come out in February, obligating then each town, each MS4, which is a municipal sanitary storm sewer system,